Hey all, Heretic here, and today in the Battlegrounds we're going to be talking about the minion Motley Phalanx. This relatively new minion is a tier 6 with taunt, death rattle, give a minion of each type friendly +7/+7. Obviously, that's a nice stat line buff. Because it's a death rattle, there's a lot of ways to trigger it, and this minion is an all type. So one, it's in every single lobby, and two, because it's every type, there's a lot of ways you can abuse this, get additional copies of it, trigger it extra times. It's just got a lot of innate power built into that all tag. And I don't expect it to exist the way it does for long. I'm pretty sure once we get the anomalies gone, this is going to be debuffed. It's gonna get a nerf a little bit, if not just outright removed, because the potential for this card is very high. We're gonna jump into why and look at all the different ways we can build this and make it work. First, what are the key minions? So these are the minions that are gonna work with this card all the time. In basically most lobbies, you'll find some variation of these minions. So first, I would say the best thing to find with them is Titus Rivendare. So no matter what you're building, Titus is gonna trigger your death rattles an extra time. You're given +7/7, now you're giving +14/+14. However many times and other ways you might find ways to trigger this, it's gonna give you an extra trigger of all of that. So Titus Rivendare, as he's neutral, because he's every single lobby, is a great complement to this card. Next, I would have to say any cleave. So when I'm looking at cleaves, I'm looking at a Blade Collector, a Wildfire Elemental to a lesser extent, and a Foe Reaper. Hey, if you're in the right lobby, all three of these, why not? Throw them out there, get the trifecta, and kick some serious butt. Obviously, buffing your cleaves with a bunch of stats, every combat is going to be really good. That's addition to any other cards you're cycling. Just because you've got this build going doesn't mean you're not still cycling cards to get additional buffs on these key minions. So it definitely is in your interest to cycle. Next, I would say Divine Shields. Why? Well, you're sticking a lot of stats on your minions. Divine Shields give you an extra swing essentially because you're going to negate that first round of damage. So Divine Shield minions are fantastic. And because this minion gives you explosive stats, you could swap out minions on the go. If you have, say, an Annoyatron and you now want to upgrade to a Deflecto, sell the Annoyatron, put a Deflecto. It just costs you gold. You don't really care about the stats on that Annoyo. You want to lose the taunt because you want the Deflecto. So it's an easy swap to make. You could really, all the parts in your board are interchangeable because none of the stats from this minion are permanent. They just explode during the combat and you can swap in something better. Finally, I would say Venom. Any Venom minion will work. Get it on there, buff it up, good to go. Now, of course, once again, we can swap them whenever we want. I would say the best minion, if you can help it, is a Relentless murg'houl. Relentless murg'houl has Reborn because it's sitting at the end of your board, so typically by the time it gets to swing or gets swung at, you've already got enough minions to die, where this thing is going to have Reborn, and then it's going to be a threat to your opponent, even more so because it's got big stats, it's got Reborn, and it's got Venom. It's just sitting on the end, lurking, ready to pounce. Let's talk tech cards. Now, you're like, Heretic, how are these tech cards? All the cards you've given me are pretty specific already, but those are all cards and variations of cards that can be in any lobby. They're kind of generic terms, Cleave, Divine Shield. Now we're talking about tribe-specific or neutrals. Reef Explorer is probably one of the best examples of this because Reef Explorer is going to give you a discover of a tribe you don't have. Well, here's the trick. Let's say you have a phalanx already and you want to get more of them. You only need to have one of each of the 5 tribes on the board. So when you play that Reef Explorer, it's very likely to offer you a phalanx. Once you've got 5 tribes, it has to offer you a phalanx because that's all there is. Unless they're all out of the pool, it's going to go, okay, well, let me check all the boxes. All the tribes are in. The only thing that's an all card, and is the tribes that aren't in this game, are the phalanx. So now the phalanxes are going to just appear. If you have a brand and you play this, you're going to get 2 phalanxes. So if you've already got 1, you've got 4 other tribes on the board. The phalanx is covering the 5th. You play the brand and the Reef Explorer, bam, gold, or just more of them. Just discover all the copies you really want. Next, in our neutral land, I would say probably be Upbeat Duo because you just park it next to your phalanx and it's going to give you extra copies of it. or whatever card you want to copy that you might already have. But Upbeat is going to help give you those extra copies to get more value out of your phalanxes. If beasts are in, you have a lot of options and they're all good. First, Sprightly Scarab. Sprightly Scarab gives a friendly beast taunt, which here the phalanx already has, so you don't care, or Reborn. Now Reborn you care about a whole lot. You put Reborn on this thing and now you're getting 2 death rattles out of it. Otherwise you find a Hawkstrider. Hawkstrider at the beginning of the turn is going to trigger all your death rattles. Well, if you've already got a phalanx, you already got a Titus, that means your beast slot being occupied. This means you're getting 2 charges of it right off the bat before anything happens, any other tricks. Now, it is important to remember that hero powers do go first, so if your opponent has a hero power that's going to do something negatively to your board, then there's not much you can do to avoid that. But still, odds are this is going to get before any of their swings happen and give you bigger value. Mechs or demons are in, mecha-jaraxxus is an option. Mecha-jaraxxus, even if it doesn't give you the right one, will probably give you something that you can buff either a mech or a demon, as long as it's not taunt. You don't want taunt on the board. The only way you want to use that taunt card is to put it on your phalanx if you get it. But if it gives you the Rin Fury, that means it's more likely to die when it attacks. If you give it Reborn, because beasts aren't in this lobby, now you've got Reborn on this thing. Mecha-jaraxxus, definitely worth your time. Demons are in your lobby, Cultist Sathara will do the job. Cultist Sathara will summon the first demon that died. Well, if your first demon that died was the Motley Phalanx, and heaven forbid you already have a Titus, now you're getting 2 more Motley Phalanxes. Maybe you have gold copies and you're getting more and more copies. Cultist Sathara will do the job. In the same exact mindset, let's say you have a Kangor's Apprentice. Once again, Max. You sit there, you put Kangors in there, your phalanx dies, it triggers a whole bunch. Your Kangors dies, it triggers, gives you more phalanxes. You have that Titus the whole time, triggering all these extra charges. You're starting to see the cascade effect. Your board is exploding with stats that is really hard to beat in the early phase of the game. If the game goes really long, yeah, they can fight back. But in the mid game, and you're sitting there like turn 10, 12, this can really be a problem for some people to deal with. If undead are in, Soul Splitter. You sit that Soul Splitter and back, it's going to look for undead minions to give Reborn to. The only thing is going to be the Phalanx. Now your Phalanx has got Reborn. Now you've got more value. Just keep doing it. This board is all about finding ways to trigger these death rattles and then get more triggers of the death rattles. And as you can see with all these different tribes, there's a lot of ways to bring them back or just get more triggers of these key death rattles that'll make your board just massively big in just the blink of an eye. So how do we counter this board? Well, that's tough because it gets really big really fast. Now, the later in the game it goes and you have a big stat board that's growing slowly over time, you usually can beat it down. You get enough minions with enough big stats. If you're running Nomi, if you're running Deep Blue, you're probably going to get big enough to beat this the later it goes, especially if we're talking like turn 13, 16, you're probably going to be able to beat this down. But it's hard to beat in that turn up through 12 when you haven't had the time to really explode. So the minions you need to look at is, well, if they're using Reborn on the phalanxes, let's try to minimize the benefits of their Reborn. So we'll use a Sindori Straight Shot. It already has taunt. Obviously, they want it to have taunt. They're not going to take away taunt from this thing because they need it to die. So you run your Sindori at it, you strip the Reborn off. At least you're getting rid of a charge. Now, if they've buffed it up a whole lot and you run your Sindori at it, consider putting in a tiny taunt. Throw in that Annoyatron. And now your Sindori goes first, strips Reborn off this thing, strips taunt off this thing. Their 50-50 phalanx hits your Divine Shield 1-2 and nothing. And then as long as your minions don't hit stupid, and I can't do anything about how your minions hit, you should be okay because they're not going to get these additional triggers. Bad hits aside, this is probably the easiest way to deal with this, assuming they only have 1 or 2 of these. Typically, a board like this is using a Titus. Well, even if they're triggering pre-combat through a Hawkstrider, you're going to be able to use things like Audacious Anchor or Zap to get in the backline and get that zap if it hasn't been buffed. Knock it out, get rid of those extra charges, and at least their stats are not getting quite so astronomical. And of course, Venom. You run any Murloc package, you run some Venom into it, and you usually can get through most of it. The problem is they have a lot of summons, they have a lot of ways to bring these things back. So you really need to get a really good package of Venom. I think stats are probably the easiest way to beat this thing when you just hit critical mass. Obviously, a very well-designed scam package can do the job, but typically I like just beating it down with big stats, not worrying about it. But it really depends when you face them. If you face them really early, you can get knocked out before you get a chance because, you know, they're all tier 6 and they're summoning a bunch of additional tier 6s. So if you don't chew through them all, odds are you're taking 15 damage. There's no cap, maybe more at the end. And that's it. That's how you make Phalanx work. That's how you counter it. That's the minions you're looking for. Phalanx is a frustrating card to deal with depending when it is in the game. If you hit it early, it is a monster on your opponent's board and it's the same on your side. But the later in the game gets, the less that value comes into being. So if you're playing Phalanx, you definitely want to transition into some kind of scam package for the backside of your board where you know, you got a bat skill, kicking out cards from your hand, stuff like that, you can get more value. If you're running a brand and you're buffing up these cards, that way they have a little more stats than just what the Phalanx is giving them, you're gonna get better results. But overall, Phalanx is a very frustrating card to deal with depending when you see it. You see it early, really, really hurts. And if you get it early, it feels really, really good. Tell me what you think in the comments below. Do you hate Phalanx, love Phalanx? I've had a few people say they have no idea how it works. So I really wanted to give a guide where we talk about some of the ways we can make it work a little better and counter it when you see it and go, oh crap, what do I do? Thanks for watching all. I hope you learned a few things. I hope you had a good time and I hope to see you in the Battlegrounds. Till then, have a great day. Later.